Coach Tyler Wall was a 38-year-old fitness mentor who played a central role in MrBeast's recent video, Lose 100 Pounds, Win $250,000, where he trained contestant Maj in a grueling months-long weight loss journey. Tyler provided constant support physically and emotionally as Maj fought to shed over 100 pounds. But tragically, midway through filming, Coach Wall was found dead in his Greenville, North Carolina apartment on February 18, 2025. His death was described as sudden and unexpected, with no official cause publicly disclosed. Completely devastated, the MrBeast team gave Maj the choice to stop the challenge, but he chose to continue in honor of his late coach. Maj ultimately completed the drastic transformation, dropping from 324 pounds to 222, achieving the goal he and his coach set out to reach together. Despite initial hesitation, the MrBeast team chose to release the video with a tribute honoring Tyler's impact, ending with the words, "In loving memory of Coach Tyler Wall." Decades of intense drumming took a brutal toll on Phil Collins' body, causing such severe nerve damage that he could no longer hold onto drumsticks. After spinal surgery in 2009, Collins lost much of the feeling in his hands and was forced to give up drumming entirely. The loss devastated him to the point where he contemplated taking his own life. In 1974, Stanford student Arliss Perry was found murdered in a campus chapel, posed kneeling at the altar with a candle stuck inside her body in what appeared to be a ritualistic killing. The case went cold for decades until in 2018, DNA linked it to a campus security guard who took his own life as police attempted to arrest him. In 2021, during a wedding ceremony in Uttar Pradesh, India, a bride named Sarabi collapsed from a heart attack and was pronounced dead shortly afterwards. But instead of canceling the expensive event, both families agreed to continue the wedding by marrying the groom to Sarabi's younger sister, Nisha. The ceremony went on while Sarabi's body was placed in another room in the house. The incident shocked many and was confirmed by local news and relatives, who watched in total disbelief as a wedding and funeral unfolded under the same roof. Mark Hoffman was a skilled forger who gained notoriety in 1980s Utah by selling fake historical documents, many of which targeted early Mormon history. His most infamous creation, the Salamander Letter, falsely claimed that Joseph Smith's divine revelations involved a magical salamander, casting the origins of the Latter-day Saints Church in a bizarre and controversial light. Hoffman sold these forgeries for tens of thousands of dollars, duping collectors, historians, and even high-ranking church officials. But as demand grew, he began accepting payments for documents he hadn't yet forged, falling deep into debt. When clients started questioning delays in authenticity, Hoffman resorted to violence, killing 2 people with homemade bombs before accidentally injuring himself while attempting to plant a third. Although mangled, he survived and later pled guilty to murder and fraud. Now 70 years old, he's been in prison since 1987 and will likely remain there for the rest of his life. Before launching Punk'd, Ashton Kutcher was developing a much darker hidden camera show called Harassment. In 2002, one of its earliest pranks involved staging a gruesome fake murder scene inside a Las Vegas hotel room, complete with a very realistic, bloody, lifeless corpse. 2 unsuspecting guests walked in, believed they had discovered a real dead body, and were left completely traumatized. The stunt triggered a $10 million lawsuit against Kutcher, MTV, and the hotel, forcing the network to shut down the show before even airing a single episode. The backlash was so severe that Harassment was scrapped entirely, leading to the creation of the far tamer celebrity prank show Punk'd. In 2007, a Massachusetts state employee named Michael Fiola was nearly sent to prison after countless files of child porn were discovered on his work-issued laptop. He was immediately fired and charged, facing years behind bars, until forensic experts discovered that the device had actually been infected with a virus that automatically visited up to 40 CP sites per minute, even when he was nowhere near it. The activity was so extreme and constant that it proved impossible for a human to replicate, ultimately clearing Fiola's name. Though the charges were dropped, Michael and his wife spent nearly $250,000 defending him from an awful crime he never committed. Before becoming one of boxing's most infamous promoters, Don King was no stranger to violence. In 1954, he shot and killed a man who was allegedly trying to rob one of King's gambling operations. The killing was ruled self-defense, and King walked free. But in 1966, he was involved in a far more brutal incident, stomping a man to death over a $600 gambling debt. He was convicted of manslaughter and served only 4 years in prison. After his release, King quickly climbed the ranks of the pro boxing world, building a multi-million-dollar empire despite the bodies he left behind. In 2001, an elderly Japanese man named Tatsuo Osako passed away quietly at the age of 88. It wasn't until after his death that people discovered he had helped over 2,000 Jewish refugees escape Nazi persecution during World War II by quietly stamping their travel documents and sheep-herding them onto ships bound for safety. He never spoke of his actions, kept no accolades, and lived a modest life as a travel agent. His family only found out that he'd secretly saved thousands of lives after discovering old photos and records that were tucked away in his home. Tara Correa McMullen was a rising young actress best known for playing a gang-affiliated teen on Judging Amy, but in a cruel twist of fate, her real life began to mirror her on-screen role. At just 16, she started dating a 26-year-old member of the Crips and moved into gang territory in Inglewood, California. In 2005, she was gunned down outside of her apartment in a gang-related shooting, struck multiple times and left to die on the sidewalk. The man who killed her was later sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms without parole. In 2011, 48-year-old New Zealand truck driver Stephen McCormick slipped between the cab and trailer of his truck and landed ass first onto a compressed air hose. The metal nozzle pierced his left cheek and began blasting air into his body at around 100 psi. But instead of entering his bloodstream, which would have killed him instantly, the air forced its way beneath his skin, inflating him like a balloon and separating his fat from muscle tissue. His body swelled rapidly while his skin became dangerously tight as paramedics rushed him to the hospital. Doctors managed to relieve the pressure and stabilize him, and against all odds, McCormick survived the freak accident without any permanent damage. In 2021, 16-year-old Kennedy Littledyke was ejected from her car during a high-speed crash in Idaho, miraculously landing on a 30-foot-high power line dangling upside down by her now broken leg. The pressure from the wire pinched her femoral artery, preventing her from bleeding out, while an electrical burn cauterized another wound in her neck. She hung there for about an hour until rescuers finally cut the power and freed her. Despite having 21 surgeries and losing her leg, Kennedy miraculously survived, and now shares her story and journey to recovery to inspire others online. In 2020, 16-year-old promising soccer player Alexander Gomez was tragically shot and killed by police in Mexico after officers allegedly mistook him for a criminal when he was riding his motorcycle to buy a soda. The killing sparked national outrage and drew attention to police violence in Mexico. At the boy's funeral, his teammates honored him by placing his coffin in front of a goalpost and gently kicking a soccer ball against it to score his final goal, a moving tribute to a life full of promise that was cut tragically short. In 2008, Mark Ruffalo's younger brother Scott, a well-known Beverly Hills hairstylist, was found slumped on his bathroom floor with a single execution-style gunshot wound to the back of his head. He died a week later as police called it a targeted killing and questioned 2 individuals who were ultimately not charged. Today, Scott's death still remains an unsolved Hollywood mystery, a wound his older brother Mark still carries. Mark later said, "You never get over it, you just get used to it." In 2008, a 7-year-old boy from India named Akrid Jaswal performed life-changing surgery on a poor village girl whose fingers had been fused together from severe burns. Her family couldn't afford proper medical care, so in desperation they turned to Akrid, a child prodigy who had taught himself medicine by reading textbooks at age 5. Despite no formal training, Akrid successfully separated her fingers, restoring the use of her hand. He later entered college at age 12 and now works as a medical researcher, driven by his mission to cure cancer. In 1991, Eric Clapton's 4-year-old son Connor was visiting his mother's apartment in a New York City skyscraper. The building was undergoing maintenance, and a janitor left a window open without a safety guard on the 53rd floor. While playing, Connor ran toward the window, which was floor to ceiling, and fell 49 stories to his death. Despite the negligence, no criminal charges were filed against the worker responsible. At the time, Eric had just begun to build a relationship with Connor after years of struggling with addiction. Completely devastated, Clapton channeled his grief into writing Tears of Heaven, one of his most popular songs to this day. In 2018, a man was riding an escalator in a New York City subway station when his oversized sweatshirt suddenly became caught in the machinery. As the escalator continued moving, the fabric began to tighten around his neck. By the time help had reached him, he'd already been strangled to death by his own clothing. In 2018, Brad Lewis leaped from a 13-foot-high balcony to grab his 2-year-old son who had fallen while chasing a toy. Lewis cradled the boy midair, taking the full impact on solid concrete. He suffered a fractured skull, brain injuries, and a broken vertebrae, while his son survived with only minor injuries. At SummerSlam 1997, Stone Cold Steve Austin suffered a serious neck injury after Owen Hart botched a reverse piledriver, slamming Austin's head directly into the mat. The impact caused a bruised spinal cord and temporary paralysis, leaving Austin unable to move. He immediately told Hart, "Don't touch me, I can't move," and relayed the same to the referee, who signaled Owen to stall for time. Austin eventually regained just enough movement to finish the match with a weak roll-up. Though he continued wrestling, the injury forced Austin to abandon his technical style, and chronic neck issues ultimately led to his early retirement in 2003. Shockingly, just a year later in 1998, Owen Hart botched another piledriver, this time on Dan Severn during a live episode of Raw, causing another serious neck injury that briefly left Severn unable to move. The back-to-back incidents helped solidify the piledriver's reputation as one of wrestling's most dangerous moves and led to stricter safety protocols in the WWE. Mexican painter Frida Kahlo's life was a haunting mix of brilliance and suffering. After contracting polio at age 6, classmates called her Frida the Cripple. At 18, she was nearly killed when a steel handrail impaled her during a bus crash, entering through her pelvis and exiting her abdomen. Her spine, pelvis, collarbone, and foot were completely shattered. She endured over 30 brutal surgeries, spent months in body casts, and painted while bedridden. Frida later suffered 5 to 7 miscarriages as a result, with one nearly killing her from blood loss, and she captured the horror in disturbing works like Henry Ford Hospital, showing herself naked, bleeding, and surrounded by a floating fetus and surgical tools. Later on, gangrene took her leg, only deepening her depression. She filled her diary with dark images and wrote, "I am not sick, I am broken." Though officially ruled a pulmonary embolism, many believe she intentionally overdosed at 47. Her final diary entry read, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope to never return." In 2006, Ray Rivera vanished after receiving a sudden phone call and rushing out of his Baltimore home. Over a week later, his body was found in a locked conference room at the Belvedere Hotel, having somehow crashed through the roof from above. The hole he fell through was bizarrely placed, far too distant from any ledge to be reached by a typical jump, leading some to believe he may have been thrown off the roof or pushed from a higher level of the building. Even stranger, a cryptic note filled with movie references and secret society names was discovered taped behind his computer. The eerie case still remains officially unsolved. Just recently, paranormal investigator Dan Rivera was found dead in his hotel room while on the Devils on the Run tour in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Best known for touring with the infamous Annabelle doll from The Conjuring, the 54-year-old had spent years investigating haunted locations and was a prominent figure in the New England Society for Psychic Research. His sudden death with no signs of foul play has fueled eerie speculation, given his close proximity to one of the world's most notorious possessed objects. As of now, the cause of death remains unknown, as Rivera's mysterious end has only deepened the legend surrounding Annabelle. Ted Cassidy, best known for playing Lurch in the original Addams Family, was 6 feet 9 inches tall. He died from a botched surgery to remove a tumor from his heart, which resulted from the condition of acromegaly that caused his iconic voice, facial structure, and towering height. After leasing the World Trade Center just weeks before 9/11, Larry Silverstein filed an insurance claim arguing that the attacks on the Twin Towers constituted 2 separate terrorist events, entitling him to double the $3.5 billion per occurrence payout. The case went to court, where the court agreed with Silverstein for 9 of the 20 insurance companies, forcing them to pay double. In total, Silverstein received around $4.55 billion for the collapse of the World Trade Center. In 1991, 5 young boys vanished while searching for salamander eggs on a mountain in South Korea, earning them the nickname the Frog Boys. Despite a massive nationwide search, their remains weren't discovered until 2002, just a few miles from where they disappeared. Initially ruled as deaths by exposure, an autopsy revealed that 4 boys had suffered blunt force trauma to the head and 1 had a gunshot wound. Even more unsettling, their clothes were found tied together with bullets wrapped in them. The site was suspiciously close to a military training zone, but police refused to investigate any military involvement. No one has been held accountable to this day. In 2014, comedian Tracy Morgan was critically injured in a car crash on the New Jersey Turnpike when a Walmart tractor-trailer suddenly slammed into his limo van. The collision killed his close friend and fellow comedian James McNair and left Morgan with a broken femur, broken ribs, broken nose, and a traumatic brain injury. Doctors initially feared he might not survive, and he remained in a coma for over a week. The truck driver had reportedly been awake for more than 24 hours, prompting Morgan to sue Walmart for negligence. The company ultimately settled the lawsuit outside of court, and Tracy has publicly forgiven the driver. In 1980, a man named John Burgess, who had lost over $750,000 while gambling, attempted to extort money from Harvey's Resort Hotel in Nevada by planting one of the most sophisticated homemade bombs the FBI had ever seen. Disguised as a copy machine and weighing over 1,000 pounds, the device was placed on the second floor of the casino along with a ransom note demanding $3 million. The FBI evacuated the building and spent hours trying to disarm the bomb, but when they attempted to disable it using a controlled charge, the entire device detonated. The explosion damaged much of the building and caused over $18 million in damage, but miraculously no one was killed. Burgess was later arrested, convicted, and died while in prison. While filming Black Panther and other Marvel movies, Chadwick Boseman was secretly undergoing intensive treatment for stage 3 colon cancer, enduring surgeries and constant chemotherapy between shoots. Even most of the cast and crew had no idea that Chadwick was sick. He kept his diagnosis completely private, sharing it only with a small circle of family, his producing partner, and a few close confidants. Despite the pain and exhaustion, Boseman still continued to visit children with cancer at St. Jude's Hospital. Many of the kids he visited passed away before Chadwick did, never knowing that their hero was also fighting the same battle. In November of 1990, Life magazine published this haunting photo of AIDS activist David Kirby on his deathbed, surrounded by his grieving family in an Ohio hospital. Captured by photographer Therese Frere, the image became known as the photo that changed the face of AIDS. It humanized the epidemic at a time when stigma and fear were rampant, showing the devastating personal toll of the disease. With his family's consent, the photo was shared globally, sparking empathy, outrage, and awareness, ultimately helping to shift the public perception of AIDS. In 2020, Canadian actor Ryan Grantham, known for his roles in Riverdale and Diary of a Wimpy Kid, shot and killed his 64-year-old mother while she was playing piano in their home, then filmed the aftermath on a GoPro. Grantham then packed his car with guns, ammunition, Molotov cocktails, and a map to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's residence, allegedly planning to assassinate him. But instead, he drove to a police station and turned himself in. During the trial, it was revealed that Grantham was suffering from severe depression and suicidal thoughts. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with a possibility of parole in 14 years. In 1988, expert skydiver Ivan McGuire boarded a plane in North Carolina to film a routine jump from 10,000 feet. With over 800 jumps under his belt, he was calm, confident, and fully focused on capturing the perfect footage. His helmet camera recorded everything, his smooth exit from the plane, the free fall, and the other jumpers floating below. But partway through the descent, McGuire began frantically patting his back, expressing confusion that quickly turned to panic. Just seconds before impact, his voice can be heard yelling, "Oh my God, no." He was apparently so focused on filming that he had jumped without a parachute. In 2019, Daniela Lace left a Marilyn Manson concert in Ontario while heavily intoxicated and drove the wrong way down a residential street, crashing into a home and rupturing a gas line. 15 minutes later, the house exploded, destroying 4 homes, injuring 7 people including first responders, and causing an estimated $10 to $15 million in damage. Lace was sentenced to 3 years in prison after pleading guilty to impaired driving causing bodily harm. In a bizarre twist, she and her father later sued the concert venue's alcohol vendor, claiming they were responsible for overseeing her and allowing her to drive drunk. The Bodies exhibit, which displays real human cadavers preserved through plastination, has long been shrouded in controversy due to allegations that many of the bodies were sourced from Chinese prisons without consent. Human rights groups believe that some of the corpses may belong to executed prisoners or political dissidents, including members of persecuted groups like Falun Gong. In 2008, the exhibit's parent company was forced to admit that it couldn't verify the origins of the bodies, posting a disclaimer that some remains may have come from Chinese prisoners. Visitors may unknowingly be viewing the dissected bodies of people who died under horrific conditions. In July of 2023, Australian woman Erin Patterson invited her ex-in-laws and their relatives over for lunch, serving them a homemade beef Wellington laced with one of the deadliest fungi on Earth, death cap mushrooms. Within a few days, 3 of them were dead from agonizing organ failure, and a 4th barely survived after a liver transplant. Patterson claimed it was a tragic accident, but investigators found damning evidence, including a food dehydrator tied to the poison and inconsistent stories about where the mushrooms came from. She was recently convicted of 3 counts of murder and likely faces life in prison. In the mid-1800s, women across the Western world wore massive crinolines, hoop skirts that ballooned outward in all directions, often made from highly flammable fabrics like cotton. The size made them elegant but deadly. They caught fire easily near candles or fireplaces, and the sheer width made them nearly impossible to escape the flames. Within just 2 months in 1863, 19 English women burnt to death after their dresses caught fire. By the end of the decade, more than 3,000 people had died as a result of crinoline fires. In 2013, Caleb McGilvery, aka Kai the hatchet-wielding hitchhiker, went viral after a wild TV interview where he described stopping an attacker with a hatchet, shouting, "Smash! Smash! Smash!" But just a few months later, he was arrested for the murder of 73-year-old lawyer Joseph Galfy in New Jersey. Galfy was found beaten to death in his own home, as Kai had reportedly punched, kicked, and stomped him until he died. Kai claimed it was self-defense after being drugged and sexually assaulted, but prosecutors said there was no evidence in his favor. He was convicted of first-degree murder in 2019 and sentenced to 57 years in prison. In 2014, Jose Salvador Alvarenga was rescued after surviving 438 days lost at sea, a journey that began when his fishing boat was blown off course in Mexico. He drifted over 6,000 miles across the Pacific in a small boat, surviving by eating raw fish, turtles, and seabirds, while drinking rainwater, turtle blood, and his own pee. When he finally washed ashore in the Marshall Islands, he was sunburnt, emaciated, and clutching a knife in terror. Though his story was initially met with skepticism, experts later confirmed it was entirely plausible, setting the record for the longest solo survival at sea by far. January of 2024, 29-year-old Nolan Arbaugh became the first human to receive a Neuralink brain implant after being paralyzed in a diving accident. Though the surgery was celebrated as a milestone, things quickly unraveled. 85% of the device's threads retracted from his brain, crippling its function. Neuralink scrambled to deploy emergency software fixes just to keep it working, allowing Nolan to play chess and move a cursor with his thoughts. The surgery carried serious risks, including infection, brain damage, and long-term complications. Arbaugh's implant was never removed, and the company hasn't disclosed the full extent of its ongoing effects. In 2017, retired U.S. Army Colonel David Will Riggins was awarded $8.4 million in a defamation lawsuit after a woman publicly accused him of raping her decades earlier when they were cadets at West Point. Just as Riggins was being considered for promotion as Brigadier General, the accusation was posted on a blog, effectively derailing his military career. But an investigation soon found no supporting evidence, and a Virginia jury later determined the woman's claims were provably false. Although the final payout was reduced to around $2.3 million, Riggins said he was grateful to have his name cleared, even if the damage to his career couldn't be undone. In the early 90s, Andrew Martinez became a bizarre campus icon at UC Berkeley for attending classes completely nude, claiming he was protesting what he saw as oppressive social norms. Nicknamed the Naked Guy, he was repeatedly arrested, eventually expelled, and banned from campus after the school changed its policies just to stop him. But behind the act was a deepening struggle with mental illness that was later diagnosed as schizophrenia. Over the next decade, his life unraveled into a cycle of homelessness, institutionalization, and jail time. In 2006, at just 33 years old, Martinez was found dead by suicide in a Santa Clara jail cell. In 1965, 22-year-old Lester Eubanks brutally murdered 14-year-old Mary Ellen Diener after attempting to rape her behind a house near a laundromat, shooting her twice, going home to change, then returning to bludgeon her to death with a brick upon realizing she was still alive. He was sentenced to death, but in 1972, just 3 days before his scheduled execution, Lester's sentence was commuted when Ohio temporarily suspended the death penalty. Declared a model prisoner, Eubanks was granted a bizarre privilege the next year, an unsupervised Christmas shopping trip at a mall. At some point, he walked away and simply vanished, and has been on the run ever since. Tila Tequila was one of the internet's first ever influencers, rising to fame on MySpace before landing an MTV dating show that made her a household name. But after the spotlight faded, her life spiraled into chaos, marked by heavy drug use, mental breakdowns, and increasingly disturbing behavior. She once claimed to have died and been resurrected, called herself the Queen of the Alt-Right, and posed in Nazi uniforms giving the Hitler salute in front of Auschwitz. After being banned from several platforms including Twitter and Facebook, Tila later declared herself a celestial being who was sent here to destroy Satan. In 1967, Singapore was gripped by a bizarre mass panic known as Coro or genital retraction syndrome, where thousands of men became convinced their schlongolians were shrinking into their bodies and that they would die if it vanished completely. Fueled by rumors that tainted pork was to blame, hospitals were flooded with terrified men clutching their groins, some even using clamps or strings to hold it in place. Over 400 cases were reported within just a few days. Pork sales plummeted, and public health officials had to step in to calm the chaos. When Alexander the Great died in 323 BC at the age of 32, his body reportedly showed no signs of decomposition for 6 days, astonishing the ancient Greeks and fueling the belief that he was a god. But modern medical experts have proposed a much darker explanation. Alexander may have suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare neurological disorder that causes full body paralysis while leaving the person mentally aware. If true, it means he may have been mistakenly declared dead while still conscious, and was ultimately buried alive, fully aware of what was happening but unable to move or speak. In 1969, the Black Panthers launched a free breakfast program that fed thousands of hungry kids before school in the poorest black communities. But J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI saw it as a threat to national security, apparently fearing that it would make the Black Panthers look too humane. So in response, in multiple cities, police raided kitchens at dawn, tearing apart food supplies and in some cases even urinating on the groceries, making it clear that feeding black children was more threatening than letting them starve. In the 1990s, Belgium was shaken by the horrific case of Marc Dutroux, a convicted predator who, after early release from prison, built a hidden soundproof dungeon beneath his home. In 1995, he kidnapped two 8-year-old girls named Julie and Melissa and locked them inside the chamber. Later that year, he was jailed for several months after stealing a car and left the girls trapped in the basement. Dutroux claimed he told his wife to feed them, but she never did, and the girls slowly starved to death in total darkness. When police finally searched the home 1 year later, they found their bodies buried in the yard along with 2 more victims, teenage girls that Dutroux had drugged, abused, and murdered. Investigators had previously searched the home but missed the hidden cell, ignoring repeated warnings and reports of screams from neighbors. The public was completely outraged as over 300,000 people marched silently through Brussels in what became known as the White March, Belgium's largest protest since World War II. In August of 2004, 21-year-old Josh Hutcherson and his longtime friend 23-year-old Frankie Brome spent the night drinking at a bar in Georgia. On the drive home, Brome leaned his head outside the passenger side window, apparently to get some fresh air. At the same time, Hutcherson, heavily intoxicated with a blood alcohol level around 0.22, veered off the road and struck a support wire for a telephone pole, decapitating Brome instantly. Apparently unaware of what had happened, Hutcherson drove more than 10 miles home, parked the truck with Brome's headless body still inside, and went to bed. The next morning, a neighbor discovered the body still inside the vehicle, and Brome's head was later recovered from the crash site. Hutcherson was charged with vehicular homicide and pleaded guilty in 2005, receiving a 5-year sentence. In a surprising twist, Brome's family, who had known Hutcherson for years, publicly asked the court for some leniency, stating they didn't want Hutcherson imprisoned. Before he was a convicted felon, NFL star quarterback Michael Vick was secretly running a brutal dogfighting ring on his own property in Virginia. For years, he and his associates bred pit bulls for violent, high-stakes fights, and when the dogs underperformed, they were tortured and killed in some of the most sadistic ways imaginable. Vick admitted to personally helping drown, beat, hang, shoot, and even electrocute dogs to death. One of the most disturbing methods involved clipping jumper cables to a dog's body and lowering it into a shallow pool of water until the animal died in agony. When the operation was finally exposed, Vick served 23 months in prison, losing his career, endorsements, and nearly $100 million. Over 70 dogs were rescued from the compound, many scarred for life and too damaged to recover, though some were rehabilitated and adopted into loving homes. Despite Vick's eventual return to the NFL and carefully staged public apologies, the cruelty he oversaw left a permanent stain on his legacy.